Welcome to Roundtail Radio. Through our conversations, we discover the holy in the ordinary, look for moments of grace and peace, and redefine what we talk about when we talk about faith. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Leslie.
How you doing?
You seem happy.
We're having fun.
Getting off to a good start.
Yes, for sure. I have to start off this morning with a bit of a funny.
All right.
Last week, we talked about John the Baptist.
We did.
Apologies for the audio quality, guys. We're back in our space, so
It was
everything
a test
should be
to
fine
see if
now.
anyone noticed the difference.
Yeah, I bet they did. But then in the message on Sunday, you were mentioning John the Baptizer.
Yes.
And something about the way you said it, I almost fell off my chair. I was laughing so hard. This is a little funny in my head because I was like, it is John. He is the Baptizer. It was just like, he sounded like a movie.
Could you see it in a big marquee?
Yeah, like an anti-hero. John is the Baptizer. And it made me laugh. And also, I never heard him refer to it like that, even though the Baptizer.
Right.
Because it was John the Baptist. And so I was like, I made the obvious connection, which most people I'm sure have made to the Baptist tradition of like, that's
there you are.
the Baptizer Baptist. I got it now.
You got it.
It took a really long time. And then also like made me contemplate, I wonder what the origin of the word Baptist is and how that all like in language has worked. And I figured you might have an answer. So I'm putting you on the spot right now.
Baptizo.
Oh, there you go.
There it is.
So what is
baptized
baptizo?
in Greek.
So
Baptizo.
that is the sacred act of the thing.
That is. That is the sacred act of the thing.
Sorry. Eloquent as always.
A loose translation for sure.
Got it.
I love your comment about the baptizer because I've noticed that in translations, New Testament translations in the last, let's just say more recent translations, the translators love that term, the baptizer. And they're taking it away from, the more static, the Baptist.
Right.
So it's a more action-oriented.
It is action-oriented. Yeah, it sounds like an action hero or something.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. It's very fun. Speaking of language,
yes,
we had a question from one of our friends, Krista.
Okay.
And Krista was wondering about the origin of just the word Advent, as we are now in Advent. And we all kind of, I don't know about you, but every year I'm sort of like, right, Advent. And I sort of try to figure out and navigate my way through it to Christmas.
Yep.
It's kind of a funny transition time, I feel like sometimes.
It is. And before we actually say what that is, it reminds me that, all faiths have their own language, right? Their own vocabulary. And part of becoming involved in a faith is that you need to learn the language. And so I think there's been an attempt to say, well, can't we kind of do away with all of that? Isn't there a simpler way? But actually, these uniquenesses are part of what makes every tradition special. And it's about getting at greater depth, spiritual depth. So Advent comes from a Latin word, adventus. It can mean coming or arrival or appearance. Okay. And traditionally within Christianity, it's been used in two ways. So the advent of Jesus literally is the time he shows up and John the Baptizer baptizes him. It also refers to the long-held belief that there is a second coming and Jesus will appear, and that's this time of kind of universal reckoning. And there are references in the New Testament to that, and where he makes reference to that second coming. And that's, for many Christians, that's a very important part of their faith, this sense that there will finally be that evening out of everything. So Advent is used in both senses. And it's a short season. It's only a little over 4 weeks long leading up to Christmas. And that's a little bit of the background. I have to say there was, in some communion services, there's this language that's used that Christ has come, Christ will come again. And I remember this wonderful little boy, Justin, who was in my church school years ago. This is when the first church. He said, we were talking about that. And kind of unusual for a little boy to be asking about this this little formula, that appears in the communion service. And I said, well, what do you think it means? And he said, I think it means that Jesus is always coming again,
Ooh.
that he's constantly appearing.
Justin for the win.
Right?
Nice.
I never forgot that. And I thought, that is absolutely brilliant. And I think there's also a great tradition. It's within many religious traditions where the spiritual leader or the teacher shows up in disguise.
Mm-hmm.
And this is especially true of the prophet Elijah in the Hebrew Bible, who it is said to this day walks the earth in disguise.
Oh, yeah.
And you never know where you'll encounter him. And so there's a tradition of that within Christianity as well.
Right.
And I think that's kind of what Justin was getting at, that you never know where you're going to meet him. And I think that's fascinating.
That is fascinating. Like with Jesus, after when Mary comes, she doesn't recognize him. She's like a gardener or something.
That's right. She does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know you. And where have you put Jesus?
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, I am he.
Yeah. Hello. That's so interesting.
Right.
There is the duality of Advent, I think, I find hard to distill into the different Sunday mornings. In terms of my job as a musician, it's like trying to hold those two, I find difficult, because the
two senses of the coming, you mean?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yep.
The impending birth, and then, as it's written in a hymnal of mine, the promised coming,
yes,
which I like.
Yep.
So a baby's going to be born language, I find easier. There's more. It feels more hopeful. And then the promise coming thing, I feel like that for me theologically is difficult.
Yep.
When I was a teenager, what were those books called they were about the rapture?
Left Behind series.
I was obsessed.
Yeah.
I had all of them.
Yep.
Like many people. But I feel like that has no longer part of my theology in quite the same way that it was then. And so I feel like I have complicated feelings about it. And like, it feels very tied to doesn't feel connected with how I view all of it now.
Yes.
So I feel like that part of Advent feels sticky and tricky.
Yeah. It's funny. I have a childhood memory of an older relative who was trying to explain this to me, I think. Heaven knows how this came up in a conversation, because ours was not a religious household.
Yeah.
But somebody had this idea, right, about the second coming. And I remember this person saying to me, well, Jesus is going to appear out of the clouds, and everyone is going to be entranced with this vision of him coming, right?
And he comes with clouds descending.
Yes, exactly. And I have such a memory of that conversation, that moment where that person was trying to, I was probably 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah.
But that is a very powerful image. And I've seen that image depicted in art.
Oh, yeah.
And especially in a lot of people's homes, as a pastor over the years, I've seen that image, that it's a very compelling image. But I'm with Justin.
You're with Justin.
On this, that there's always this sense in which the spirit, this energy of Jesus is coming into our lives. And I like the idea that it's maybe happening in some disguised ways, because I think that fits biblically, that there's a long-standing tradition of understanding God as the elusive presence. And so just maybe one little comment about this.
Yeah.
Albert Schweitzer, who was a missionary to Africa, was an organist.
I know. I love Albert
I'm
Schweitzer.
telling the wrong person here. And did so many things with his life, right? He was also a scholar.
Yes.
But he, in the preface to one of his famous books, which was called The Quest of the Historical Jesus, he has it's about a paragraph long, but it ends with, he comes to us as one unknown. And I think that's the spirit that Justin was capturing a little bit, and that to me is that this coming again is always happening.
I think for me, the thing I struggle with is sometimes around this idea of a second coming or rapture, is that the idea that this earth is not, it feels like, the earth, this community, this earth we share, is left, is no longer applicable. So what kind of happens here doesn't really matter. And I have a real problem with that.
Right.
It makes it feel like, well, we can do whatever we want, or we can, be harmful to our beautiful earth, our beautiful creation, because this isn't the final resting place. So it's like, this is
Correct.
the old place. And I feel like that goes against honoring God's creation, honoring one another. And I feel like it can create some iffy behaviors.
Yes, that's
tendencies.
It's a widely held theological belief, and that it's maybe even articulated in this way, that people might say, it's a shame what's happening to the creation, and it's a shame that what we've done to the creation is also harming people. But there will again be that day, that great day coming by and by, when we'll all be released from this. I actually think that view is part of what would have been called in early Christianity as part of Gnosticism, right? That the Gnostic view is that if you had the right, being on earth was not the be all and end all, right? That you had to have the right knowledge, from that Greek word gnosis. So that's where we get the Gnostic Gospels. And if you had the right knowledge, which was the right belief in Jesus, then you'd get off of this bus onto something better.
Right.
And Christianity ultimately decided that was not an authoritative teaching. And so by doing so, it elevated the importance of the creation. Now, unfortunately, we haven't paid real great attention to that, but there you are.
Yeah.
So it's like we had the understanding, but we haven't practiced it consistently over the years. So I definitely, I've read some really interesting books from the creation care aspect, talking about populations in the United States where a lot of damage has been inflicted because of the dependence on fossil fuels. Louisiana would be an example, where there's been so much damage inflicted to the land, and as a result, sinkholes and, cancer-producing waste that's been allowed to languish in rivers and streams. People eat the fish, they get sick. And there was a book I read a few years ago, Strangers in Our Own Land, I think was the title of it. But basically, a really wonderful journalist spending about 3 years in the southeastern part of the United States, talking with people who articulated over and over again that view that it's a shame what's happened to creation, and it's a shame that we're getting sick because of it. But in the end, it'll all work out.
Yeah, that shoulder shrug it's the butt and the shrug, like, meh.
Yeah.
It's so disconnected from love thy neighbor.
And the author, really struggled with this. And she writes beautifully about her struggle, actually, which is that she came to love these people and care about them, and yet would hear them talk in this way that couldn't resonate with her theologically at all. So, and on the first Sunday of Advent, many times there's a focus on that end of the world language. There's a passage in Mark, which is often read, which is kind of called the little apocalypse. And I have to say, I don't think there is such a thing as a little apocalypse. One apocalypse will ruin pretty much everything.
Yeah,
right?
What a phrase.
But that's kind of the again, this whole discussion of the ending of the world. But I've heard people talk about that, scholars discuss that text to say it's not a text about the ending of the world. It's a poetic way of describing the ending of a world.
Oh, okay.
The ending of a worldview, right? The ending of a certain way of organizing life. And it is cataclysmic when that happens. And I think, have experienced some of that coming out of the pandemic. Certain things about our culture that we had taken for granted are not around anymore because of that. Yeah. An ending of a world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like an era or a chapter, maybe.
Yes. Yeah.
So
exactly.
Sort of big seismic shift. I wonder what it's going to take for a seismic shift in our care of our earth. I wonder what that's going to take. And I know a lot of people are concerned it will be too late, right? A lot of things feel too late. I wonder, because the pandemic was so disruptive. And I wonder what good we can find and what we can learn there to create bigger change.
There's a Christian climate scientist who teaches, I think, at Texas Tech. Her name is, I think it's Christina Hayhoe. And the title of a book that she's written, I believe, is called Saving Us. And she also has a newsletter that she puts out. And she always has a good news section and a bad news section. So that's good because, you get the best of what's going on, and then you get a dose of reality. And in one sense, she'll say, we actually have made incredible progress in the last 10 to 15 years on all kinds of measures. And she'll discuss that. But then she will say, however, these are the other growing edges where we haven't made progress. And she'll talk about that. And then there's always a section at the end of the newsletter about what you can do.
Nice.
And I've really appreciated that because I think in some people's minds, the advent, of the worst of what could be, feels like it's just too big for us. But it turns out that it isn't. And it's a matter of staying the course. But we're still fighting ourselves. That's the real sad part of this. But you raise a really good question, that people are wondering if there is, the more they hear these dire reports, the more they wonder if there's sufficient time to make change.
Right.
And there is actually time to make incredible change, some things that we can't correct, but a lot of things that we can do that would be helpful. So we just have to continue to work at every possible level.
It's a big problem, but I think if we join together, we're a big solution as Earth's humanity and biggest force on it.
Yeah. Well, Leslie, earlier on, you made the, kind of the connection between Advent and the second coming, and they're very great and long-standing themes in Christian life, and I think there's a lot of truth and wisdom in those texts. They're really full of challenge, and they're wake-up calls. And there's a wonderful little poem by a Spanish poet, Antonio Machado. And he says something like, Jesus, if all of your teachings could be one word, what would it be? Would it be love, forgiveness, and peace? And he says, all your words were one word, wake up.
Oh, wow. Which is 2 words.
I know. He spelled it like one.
Oh, okay. There you go. I'll take it.
He's a poet.
He can
play with language.
Do whatever he wants.
I thought that was brilliant.
That is brilliant. I love that. Wake up.
Wake up. And I think that's Advent. It's waking up to a whole new set of possibilities.
It's that great Advent hymn. Awake, awake, and greet the new morn.
Right. Yeah.
Angels herald his coming.
Right. It's a very, very, enticing time of year, not just because of Christmas, because of that for sure, but also just because of those great themes of Advent. Yeah. And we miss them if we focus only on Christmas.
Sure.
But
yeah. So I gotta tell you,
we're doing our best.
I just that's always the and also the secondary inner battle of Advent as an organist and director of music is like,
yes.
Okay, so how long will I have Advent, and then when do I just give up, and then it's Christmas? You can tell how far I made it because we had a Christmas festival here yesterday where we sang all the Christmas carols.
You bet we did.
And it was the first Sunday of Advent. So in case you wonder how I've evolved over the years.
I think the gates are open.
Yeah, it's fine. For all anyone who worked with me in my college years would be stunned because I was the biggest I'm sorry, there are 4 Sundays of Advent. I don't want to hear Joy of the World. I don't want to hear nothing. I don't want it. Christmas starts on Christmas. You should see my Instagram, by the way, of all my organist friends who are just every year they're like, there's 12 days of Christmas. It starts on Christmas, which I use as an excuse to keep my Christmas tree up.
Okay.
By the way. But
no excuse needed.
Nah, it's fine. It's always so funny. How long will I let it be? La, la, la. We're doing, I think, about 2 Sundays of Advent, specifically Advent-y stuff. Well, around here, because we have the best Christmas pageant ever.
Yes.
On the 3rd Sunday of Advent.
That's right.
So I usually give up by then. All right. I'm not give in, I think is probably more accurate. Considering we sing every Christmas carol in the pageant.
It's all out.
You get pick your battles.
Yes, you do.
Pick
yes,
your
you
battles. And they seem, and our community seems happy. So that's fundamentally my job. So.
It's a super good thing for sure.
It is.
Right?
It is.
But I think isn't this just the most amazing thing, right? To have to want to respect the traditions.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's this sort of, tidal force coming the other direction that just wants to sweep that all away. So we mix the two, keep them in conversation with each other.
I was talking with my husband the other day, and he was like, I wish Halloween was like a month earlier and Thanksgiving was a month earlier so they could all have their due, and then Christmas can take as long as it wants.
Oh, yeah.
But like the Thanksgiving could be like more early, and then Halloween isn't so cold. We had a whole thing about it. We were completely reinventing the calendar. I mean, I was, when you're in these craft stores like a Michael's or Joann's or whatever,
boy, yeah.
and it's July and there's Halloween stuff.
I know. And by Halloween, all the Christmas stuff is well
sold out.
Yes. Yeah.
It's wild.
Well, and that's what makes it such a crunch with something like Advent, because Advent is supposedly all about waiting, right? And it's the waiting for this birth of this new world to happen. And I actually love that theme so much because I think in the church in particular, our idea is that great ideas don't have to be forced. They don't have to be force fed. They'll come in their own time, which is not a widely shared view necessarily. That's not how corporate America necessarily works, right? You have to get the idea, get it into production, kind of move. The church is encouraging kind of a whole different time frame as a healthier, more soulful way of living on earth. And so it's so easy just to push right past all of those messages of waiting. And that's the challenge, is to keep that while singing, "Oh, Come All Ye Faithful."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's both and.
Both and.
And I think we've kind of figured it out, more or less.
We make it happen.
Yeah.
We'll make it happen. I think the thing I struggle with is the contrast between like the twinkle lights and the happy Christmas joy, which I love.
Yes.
And the super... like everything Adventy is kind of Lenty in terms of as in like Lent. In terms
minor.
Of, everything's a minor. Yeah. Everything's a minor. Everything's kind of a downer, which frankly, weirdly, I love playing in minor. I love it.
I know you do.
I really do. Like, yes, it's Lent. I get everything in minor.
And we're just like, it's Leslie again.
It's Leslie again. She's such a downer. It's funny because it's such
Bring us up.
I know. It's such a contrast to my actual personality. To me, major keys sometimes sound really garish. They sound like really like aggressive in my ear, and minor feels like soft and friendly. I don't know. But it's that contrast between sort of the downer Advent hymn, like, "Oh, come Emmanuel." Like, you're like, oh.
Right? Yeah.
If you notice, I do this thing. So when, tiny bit of music theory. So the difference between major and minor keys is a chord, major and minor chords. There's, to make a chord, you need 3 notes. If it's major, the third is in one place, and minor, the third is down a half step. That's the only thing that changes.
Yep.
So if you don't have that third, that middle note, you don't know what the key is. If you only have 2 notes, the first and the fifth, you don't know what key it is. So that's called an open chord.
Okay.
And so I make a habit, because I kind of refuse to do what's called a Picardy third, which is when you're in a minor key and you end in a major chord. They're like, it hurts my body. But it's crunchy and cringy. But so what I'll do, instead of like ending a minor hymn on a minor chord, I'll just leave it open and I'll leave the third out. So I always look at Dustin, because the tenor often has the third in the key in the chord. So I'd look at Dustin, I'm like, we're leaving it open. He's like, okay. He'll jump to a different note, and then we leave it open. So it sort of sounds medieval because you get a fifth. It's just this open sound, but it leaves this sense of like, what is it?
Right.
What's going to happen?
Love
it's
it.
like a question mark at the end.
I love that.
Yeah.
Now I know a little bit of what's going on behind the scenes.
Hey. I've done that for years. Because I don't want to leave, to me, like ending on the minor key, it just feels kind of like, meow.
Yeah.
But landing on the major is like, oh, no, I can't do that.
Yep.
But leaving it open is like,
I love that. Ending on a question.
Ending on a question. Is it major? Is it minor? What's going to happen next?
Right. I love it. And I think a lot of us pick this up. We don't know the theory behind it.
Yeah.
But we kind of get it. We can hear it.
Yeah.
And I know that we're very fortunate because we're part of a community of people that listen very carefully, and they appreciate that very much.
Very much.
So, we get to notice that that's happening, even if we can't articulate why.
Yeah.
I think that's fun. And I think that it just goes to show for how many hundreds of years we've depended on people who know how to do these things, right? To make those decisions. Mm-hmm. And then our hearing is shaped by that.
I could do a series of podcasts just on playing hymns and all the micro decisions that organists make.
Yeah.
In order to shape your experience, the language, the meaning. We can change whole meanings of things.
Sure.
By where we pause and where we breathe. And we have such a thoughtful choir, and they're always asking questions about, like, do we breathe here? But that might change the meaning.
Thanks for listening. Really Roundtail Radio is brought to you by the friends and members of Roundtail Community Church. For more information, please visit roundtailradio.org.
Well, I think that, as your comment about the choir just changing the breathings or changing the emphasis and how that affects the text and how we understand it. And I guess that's in some ways what we're doing with the seasons, when they go from Advent to Christmas to Epiphany and on through the year, that we can play with that.
Yeah. One of the famous ones, I think we talked about this in one of our Christmas Carol podcasts that we've done in years past, is in O Little Town of Bethlehem. Yes. The last line of one of the verses, I think it's the first one, where meek souls will receive him. Where's the comma?
Right.
In some versions, it's after where meek souls will receive him, comma, still the dear Christ enters in, or where meek souls will receive him still.
Yep. The dear Christ enters in. Mm-hmm.
It's different.
It is different.
It's different.
Yep.
It depends on sometimes it depends on the hymnal. Mm-hmm. My organ teacher, I think, had he would always move it.
Oh, interesting.
It would alternate year to year.
Well, that's one way of handling it, right?
You keep it fresh.
Well, I think that's a great lesson, because if you're part of a tradition where it can change, somebody can make a decision about that. That's actually communicating quite a religious truth.
Yeah.
Right? That other things can change. Mm-hmm. And I love that. Love that spirit of openness.
Yeah, it's good. I think the comma in the 82 hymnal is before the still, which I think it's where you don't expect it to be.
Okay.
Which is interesting. So it's always interesting to think about. I think about that every time we do that hymn. I thought about it yesterday.
I'm going to think about it now.
Yeah, we were singing. I was like, oh, where's the comma? Because I didn't have enough to do.
Yeah, exactly. Move it around.
Time to let your mind wander.
Well, I think that, I feel fortunate in my life that I've been around a lot of people who feel that the traditions run fluid,
yeah.
And that they can be adjusted and adapted and thought about and experimented with.
I think for me, it's that kind of, I remember in music theory class being taught basically, a lot of my friends and classmates were breaking the rules left and right for doing different music things. And my teacher was like, you have to know the rules to break them. Mm-hmm. And so to bend them the way that makes sense and to keep, so I feel like for me, knowing the traditions, having been, I've served in a lot of different religious, Christian traditions. Mm-hmm. And so I only try to break the ones I know, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I'm sure I'm breaking plenty I don't, but I try to at least think about the origins of them. And I'm like, am I keeping true to something that feels meaningful to me? And am I just expressing it in a different way? Mm-hmm. Or sometimes I just don't feel like it. Depends on how I'm feeling that day.
I love it. Well, I think that that's what keeps the spiritual journey exciting and engaging, right? That you're making those decisions, you're considering how to do it differently, and we get to benefit from that. So that's kind of a plus for everyone.
It's interesting. It's also interesting, I think, also as an organist, playing these carols that I've played every year for, been at this for professional organist for 20 years now. So I've played them at least 20 times, right? And sometimes 2-3 times a season. So I've played them a few times now. It was actually funny. I was talking with Robert, who came, my friend Robert Kwan, who's an incredible musician. He has a doctorate from Eastman, by the way.
Oh, heavens.
I know. He's ridiculously talented and ridiculously smart. He's a wonderful, wonderful musician. And he came and played Christmas carols yesterday. I was like, can you come play so I can wave my arms and be encouraging? And he was so funny because he was, up in the loft, which is a tough place to be when you're trying to keep it together with the brass and, try to keep everything together. And of course he did an incredible job. But he was like, sometimes I was just playing the Christmas carol and just looking at the mirror, making sure I was with you. We were staying together and all that stuff. And he's like, I just sort of forget where I was and then just sort of find it again.
Oh my heavens.
And I was like, yeah, I mean, that's sort of the way, because it's like built into our bodies.
Yeah.
Speaking of, this is what I'm enjoying. We're talking about music. This is great. So yesterday in the morning service, we had a different expression of praise, which was after the doxology. We went and sang "Angels We Have Heard on High." Can I tell you, the experience in my body trying to do that was like, the choir was laughing at me so hard.
I was fascinated by the transition.
It was a whole thing. So we normally do the doxology, which is old 100th, which is in G major. And then I will either modulate to F major or B flat, which is, for musicians, they're not friends. It's like, it's a little oil and water. So it's always, it's rough. It's rough on the best of days. And I've sort of made it work, and they're just kind of used to how I do it. And I just sort of and we're in F major now. I'm sure our friend Mary Jo Heath, who also has a doctorate from Eastman in music theory, she just ignores it now. But so Angels We Have Heard on High is in F major. So I'm doing my whole, we're in during the doxology, we're in G major, and now we're going to go to F major. And my brain is on autopilot and my body is on autopilot. But I'm like, no, I was going, Angels We Have Heard on High.
Wow.
Angels We Have Heard on High. And I was repeating it to myself, and the choir's like, you can do it. You can do it. And so then I morphed into it, and my whole body was like,
oh my gosh.
It's like when you hit a piece of metal with a hammer.
Oh, yeah.
It was like boing. It was the weirdest thing, because every Sunday I've played here, we have done that, and it's become part of my body of just this is what I do, and I'm not paying attention when I do it normally. I'm just like, this is how it works, and the more I keep my brain out of it, the better. I just let my body do the thing. So 7 years of it makes it tough to do something else.
Well, I was actually aware that there was going to have to be a transition. I thought, I wonder how this is going to sound.
Yeah. Well, it turned out the same, because it's the same modulation I have to do. Modulation means going from one key to another. Yep. But
I loved it.
It worked out fine, but I got shivers down my spine.
And who knows about these things that are going on, right, in the life of a musician,
right,
in the service, right?
Yeah.
We hear it. We just think everything is proceeding according to good order, and it'll all work out in the end.
I have to tell you, I love the way our choir loft is set up, because, the congregation can't see my face, but they can see the choir's face.
Yes.
And the number of knowing looks the choir and I give each other during a service is high.
Oh, that's great.
Is high. So the choir and I were having a moment, because they were appreciating the struggle.
Yes. Somebody gets it.
So there's lots of you can do it. You got it. They were really cheering me on. I appreciated that.
Oh, I love
that. They
were
very encouraging.
Oh my goodness.
And we had a really full choir on Sunday morning. Our friends were back.
Wonderful.
I love our choir.
Yeah.
They're
I completely agree. And it makes it such a rich experience, right?
Yeah.
Have all those voices. And
absolutely. It's so fun to sing together. It's so good for a person's mental health and physical health.
Yeah.
Challenges your brain. And
it's good.
Things.
It's good in every way.
Do you notice in the Christmas festival program that more ways to celebrate Christmas, the first thing was come sing with the choir.
I did notice that. I probably won't be joining you, but still, I appreciated the invitation.
I told the choir I had put it first. I was like, that's what happens when the organist makes the program. I'm going to put it first.
Oh, I just want to pick out the idea about our well-being, mental well-being, physical well-being. I mean, we are the beneficiaries of all the great music that you produce and create with the choir. But, when you listen to music and you sing, it's just so good. And every time I walk into a sanctuary and sing, I think to myself, this is such an odd thing to be doing. I mean, how many places are there in our world where adults go into a gathering or a meeting and are expected to sing?
Yeah.
Where that's actually...
It's so lost now.
A given. I think it is lost. There are even... it was funny because I was watching a football game recently, and this was in a city where there's clearly some team songs that have developed. Yeah. And I thought, wow, they're still singing. I don't hear that often, but, it's still around.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not as, pervasive as it was. And it makes it all the more important for us to be doing it.
Yeah.
In our own context.
I love with the European football tradition that all the teams they have just great songs. Everybody's got great team songs.
Yes.
I love that so much. I will say, I feel like for me, especially and now as a parent of a young person, that to me, singing and dancing and just moving your body feels so fundamental to what it means to be a human.
Yeah.
Moving your body to music, the way Mary Bear just goes all day long. She's like, what? This is super normal. This is exactly what I need. This feels good. I'm going to do this. And singing and expressing yourself. It's, I feel like we need to finding a reclaiming that feels fundamental to who we are as a person, that creativity and just expression. And again, an entire other series of podcasts we could do about that.
It's waiting. It's waiting for us.
It's great. So I'll cut us off here.
Advent. We're there. We're at the beginning and we're going to keep going.
We're singing Christmas carols in Advent. We're singing Advent carols in Advent. It's a duality and we're making it work.
We're going to live with it.
I like it.
I love it too.
It's great. Well, thank you all so much for listening. We're so glad you joined us in this conversation. Roundhill Radio is brought to you by the friends and members of Roundhill Community Church. For more information, please visit roundhillradio.org.
If you enjoyed this podcast, there are a few things that you can do that would make a big difference to us. Like the video, subscribe if you aren't, and click the notification bell and select all. Thank you.